I found out the way you find out things in my family, not from the person who did it, not through a conversation or a confession or even an uncomfortable silence that eventually filled with truth. I found out the way everything in my family eventually surfaced, sideways, through someone who didn't realize they were telling me something I didn't already know. I was standing by the dessert table at my cousin Blessing's engagement party, plate in hand, half listening to the specific hum of a large family gathering in a rented hall, the overlapping conversations, the children running between tables, the uncles who needed someone to argue with about something. My father was across the room. He was laughing. The big laugh, the one he used when he was the center of something and enjoying it. Expansive, loud, with that particular quality of a man who believes the story he is telling reflects well on him. I watched him without hearing the words at first. Then I moved slightly, the way you adjust in a noisy room to catch something. And the words came through. 95,000, just sitting there. I said to myself, Kezia needs that car, and my daughter has more than enough. I set my plate down. The table was behind me, and I set the plate down without looking, and I stood very still, and I listened to my father explain to 3 of my uncles and their wives what he had done with my bonus check. He was laughing while he told it. He was proud. I work in algorithmic trading. I have worked in it for 9 years at a firm that is not a household name, but is within the industry, well regarded and serious. The work is exacting and fast, and not particularly explainable at dinner parties, which suits me because I have never been someone who needed my work to be impressive to people outside of it. The compensation structure at my firm is base salary plus annual performance bonus. The bonus is the significant part. In a good year, it can be several times the salary. It is paid once in December by check, not direct deposit. Check. This is an old firm with old procedures, and the December bonus check is a tradition they have maintained despite everything about modern banking suggesting they should update their systems. Paper. Mailed. Mailed to the address on file. I had moved in October. New apartment, better location, closer to the office. I had updated my address with the firm in the HR system, which I had done correctly, and which I had the confirmation email to prove. What I had not done, what I did not know needed doing separately, was update the address with the specific payroll vendor the firm used for bonus disbursement, a third-party service, a separate system, a field that did not populate automatically from the main HR record. My bonus check had been mailed to my previous address. My previous address was my parents' house, where I had lived until April. My father had received a check with my name on it in an envelope that said confidential, payroll enclosed, and he had made a decision about it. I learned the shape of that decision, standing by a dessert table at my cousin's engagement party, listening to him laugh. I did not confront my father at the party. I want to be honest about why, because the honest answer is not the flattering one. The honest answer is that I was not ready, that the thing I had heard was so specific and so brazen that my mind was doing the rapid recalculation that happens when new information forces a restructuring of something you thought you understood. And I could not do that recalculation and have a public confrontation simultaneously. I went to the bathroom. I sat on the closed lid of a toilet in a rented hall bathroom with floral wallpaper and a wax melt that smelled aggressively of vanilla, and I spent 37 minutes on my phone. First, I checked my firm's secure employee portal, the bonus disbursement status. It showed the check as issued, mailed, December 8th, to an address that I looked at for a long moment before I recognized it as my parents' house. Second, I opened my banking app. No deposit of $95,000. No deposit of any amount resembling that. Nothing. Third, I called my bank's fraud line, the after-hours one, and I reported a check issued in my name that I believed had been deposited to an account I did not own. The representative walked me through the initial report. She told me what the investigation process would involve. She told me to come in person on Monday with documentation. Fourth, I texted my sister Kezia. One message, 3 words. When did you buy the car? She replied in 4 minutes. A photograph. Her, smiling, standing beside a white SUV in a dealership lot. The timestamp on the photo metadata, when I looked at it carefully, was December 14th, 6 days after my check was mailed. I flushed the toilet I hadn't used, washed my hands, checked my face in the mirror for anything that showed, and went back to the party. I ate the dessert I had abandoned. I spoke to my cousin Blessing about her fiancé and her venue and her flowers. I hugged people I hadn't seen in months. I said goodbye to my father when I left, which required me to stand within 3 feet of him and look at his face. He looked back at me with nothing particular in his expression. No discomfort, no awareness, nothing. He did not know that I knew, and the not knowing had made him entirely comfortable. I drove home thinking about that comfort, the ease of it, the laughing. He is a charming man. I want to say this because it is true, and because the truth of it is part of the story. My father is the kind of man who walks into a room and changes its temperature toward warmer, toward louder, toward whatever he's interested in talking about. He has friends everywhere. He has a laugh that people remember. He tells stories well, and he listens when he's interested with a quality of attention that makes people feel seen. He also has a relationship with money that I have been observing my whole life, and that I can only describe as other people's resources are, in some fundamental sense, available to him, not through theft in the obvious meaning. He would never have reached into a stranger's wallet. But within the family, within the structure of people who loved him, there was a looseness about whose money was whose that had always flowed in one direction, toward him, toward his needs, toward his decisions about what was needed. I had contributed to household expenses through my 20s, not the envelope arrangement of some families, nothing that formal, but the steady erosion of my savings through requests that were framed as temporary and became permanent. I had absorbed this because I had absorbed most things in my family through the specific calculus of love and obligation that children develop in houses where the calculus is never made explicit. What I had not absorbed because I had not known about it was $95,000. $95,000 for Kezia's car. Kezia, who was 28 and had a job she liked but not one that came with bonuses, who had been wanting a particular car for 2 years, who had told me about the car in the easy way she told me things. Someday, when things are better, I'm going to get that car, and who had on December 14th gotten it. I thought about Kezia standing in that dealership lot, smiling, and about my father laughing at the engagement party, and about the specific distance between what either of them thought had happened and what had actually happened. Neither of them, I was fairly certain, had thought about the person whose check was in the envelope. Monday morning, I was at my bank at 9:15, 12 minutes after they opened. The fraud officer's name was Thomas, and he had the particular efficiency of someone who dealt daily with situations where people had been wronged and time was a factor. I gave him the documentation I had assembled over the weekend, the HR confirmation of my updated address, the payroll portal showing the check's mailing destination, my banking records showing no corresponding deposit, the photograph of Kezia's car with its metadata timestamp, and a timeline I had written out in a single page that laid everything out in sequence. Thomas looked through all of it without speaking. When he finished, he looked at me. "You know who deposited it?" he said. "I believe so," I said. "Do you want to tell me, or do you want the investigation to establish it independently?" I thought about that question, about what it meant to say the name, about my father at the engagement party, laughing. "Independently," I said. "I want the process to establish it." Thomas nodded slowly, as if I had said something he respected. He opened a new form. The investigation, he explained, would involve tracing the deposit, the check's endorsement, the account it was deposited into, the verification of the signature used. Bank investigations of this type were methodical. They were also, he said carefully, not always fast. Weeks, sometimes longer. I said I understood. He also said that given the amount, $95,000, and the circumstances, the bank's fraud team would likely want to involve the payroll company and potentially my employer's HR department, since the check had been issued through a third-party vendor. There were multiple institutions with records that would need to be compared. Multiple records, I said. Yes, he said. Paper trails in cases like this are usually quite complete. Checks have a particular documentation trail. Every hand they pass through leaves a record. I thought about my father's hands. Good, I said. I did not tell my father I knew. I did not tell Kezia. I did not tell my mother, who was not part of this story in the way she had not been part of many stories in my family, present, loving in her particular limited way, and consistently unaware of what my father did with his hands when she wasn't watching. I went to work. I ran my algorithms. I attended my regular Monday risk meetings and my Thursday team reviews, and I brought the particular focus to my work that I always brought, which was the focus of someone for whom precision was not a professional requirement, but a character trait. I called my firm's HR department and explained the situation with the address discrepancy and the missing check. They were immediately helpful and immediately troubled. A missing bonus check of that size was not something they treated casually. They opened their own internal review. They contacted the payroll vendor. The payroll vendor pulled their records that showed, with the completeness that Thomas had described, every step the check had taken from the moment it left their system. Issued, mailed, received. The Postal Service had a delivery confirmation. Endorsed, deposited. The endorsement was the piece, the signature on the back of the check, a forged version of my name. Not particularly close to my actual signature, but close enough to pass the initial processing threshold. And beneath it, the depositing account information, which was my father's checking account, which had received $95,000 on December 10th, and from which, on December 13th, a transfer of $42,000 had gone to a dealership. The payroll vendor sent the documentation package to my firm's HR, who sent it to their legal department, who sent it to me with a letter that used the word unauthorized 6 times in 3 paragraphs. My firm was angry, not at me, at the situation, at the vendor's address update gap, at what had happened to their employee. They retained an attorney. I retained one too. Her name was Marguerite, and she had been practicing financial fraud litigation for 22 years and had the energy of someone who was still finding it interesting. The meeting happened on a Thursday in late February. Marguerite had arranged it as a formal mediation, a step before any legal filing, a room with a neutral mediator and a table and all relevant parties where documents could be presented and positions could be understood before anything was committed to a court record. My father came with my Uncle Jerome, who he always brought to serious situations because Jerome had a law degree he had never used professionally, but which my father treated as equivalent to active practice. My father did not know the full scope of what was coming. He knew there was a dispute about a check. He had been told by my mother in a call I later heard about from Kezia that I was making trouble about a mailing error. A mailing error. That was the frame he had arrived with. The check had gone to the wrong address. An honest mistake, surely something that could be sorted out as a family without all of this formality. He came in with the ease of a man who expected to talk his way through something. He sat across from me at the table, and he smiled, not warmly, not quite, but with the effort of warmth that he deployed when he needed a room to go his way. He said my name. He said it was good to see me. He said he was sure we could work this out. Marguerite introduced herself. The mediator introduced herself. The representative from my firm's legal department introduced himself. My father looked at the firm's attorney. Something moved in his face. Briefly, a recalibration. Then the mediator said that they would begin by reviewing the documentary record. The payroll vendor's records coordinator was present by phone. Her name was Andrea, and she had a clear, steady voice and the effect of someone who dealt in facts and had no particular feelings about the facts she was presenting. She read the records, the check number, the issue date, the payee name, my full legal name, the amount, $95,000, 0 cents, the mailing date, the delivery confirmation, the address. She read the endorsement analysis, the signature comparison, prepared by the bank's fraud examination unit, comparing the endorsement on the check to my actual signature on file with 3 institutions. Probability of matching authorship, 4%. Probability of being a different hand, 96%. She read the deposit record, the date, the account holder name, my father's full legal name. She read the subsequent transaction, the transfer, the date, the amount, the recipient, the dealership. She read it all in the same clear, steady voice, without emphasis or drama, the way facts are read when the facts are sufficient and drama is unnecessary. The room was quiet through most of it, the specific quiet of a room where something is being confirmed rather than revealed, where the people who need to hear it are hearing it in the particular register of official documentation. My father was very still. He had been speaking when the reading began, a low comment to Jerome, something I couldn't make out. As Andrea's voice continued, the comment stopped. His posture changed. Not collapse, not drama, just a subtle settling. The way a structure settles when the load it has been bearing becomes visible, and the bearing of it can no longer be casual. When Andrea finished, the mediator thanked her. The room stayed quiet. My father looked at the table. Jerome leaned toward him and said something in a low voice. My father didn't respond. He was still looking at the table, at nothing in particular, in the silence of a man whose laugh had been very loud 2 months ago at an engagement party, and who was not laughing now. The mediator said, "Mister, do you have a response to the records as presented?" My father said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "I thought she didn't need it." 7 words. I thought she didn't need it. I had prepared, in the weeks leading to this room, for many versions of what my father might say. Denial. I had prepared for that. Technical argument. I had prepared for that. Anger, redirection, the reframing of facts that he was skilled at. I had prepared for all of it. I had not prepared for the smallness of it. 7 words that contained an entire worldview, that I had more than enough, that his assessment of my enough was the relevant factor, that the check in an envelope with my name on it representing 9 years of building a career and a skill and a reputation in a demanding field, was a resource to be evaluated and redistributed by him based on his judgment of who needed what. I looked at my father for a long time. He was still looking at the table. "It wasn't yours to decide," I said. He didn't answer. "The money was mine. The decision of what to do with it was mine. You didn't ask me. You didn't tell me. You laughed about it at Blessing's engagement party." He looked up at that. "I heard you," I said. I was standing 6 feet away. Something crossed his face that I had very rarely seen there. Not shame. Exactly. My father and shame had a complicated relationship. But the specific discomfort of being seen precisely, of being witnessed in the gap between who he believed he was and what he had actually done. Marguerite spoke. She outlined the path forward, the amount to be returned, the timeline, the documentation of the agreement, the steps that would be avoided if the agreement was honored, and the steps that would be pursued if it was not. She was clear without being cruel. She was precise without being punishing. Jerome, finally finding something to do with his law degree, engaged with the specifics. My father said, once quietly without looking at me, "I'll pay it back." "Yes," I said. "You will." The repayment was structured across 6 months. Not because I needed the accommodation. I could have insisted on a lump sum, and the legal foundation was solid enough to compel it. But 6 months felt like a number that could actually be kept, and kept amounts mattered more to me than compelling amounts that fell apart. I wanted this finished properly with documentation, not stretched into a years-long battle. Every payment arrived on time. My father, it turned out, was precise about financial commitments when the alternative was courts. The last payment cleared on a Monday in August, and Marguerite sent me a 1-line email, "Final receipt confirmed. File closed." I read that email on my lunch break at my desk, with a cup of tea going slightly cold beside my keyboard. I did not call my father to acknowledge it. He did not call me. We had spoken twice since the mediation, brief, careful, informational conversations about family logistics that could not be avoided. Both times his voice had the quality it had acquired in that room, quieter than usual, slightly compressed, like a man learning to take up less space than he was accustomed to. I did not find this satisfying. I want to be honest about that because satisfaction is the emotion people expect at the end of a story like this, and I have been trying to tell you the truth throughout. What I felt was more like the feeling after a long calculation finally balances, a technical completion, correct and necessary, without the warmth that would have come from never needing the calculation in the first place. Kezia and I had a harder conversation than any of the legal ones. She had not known where the down payment came from. Not specifically. She had believed, as she told me when we finally talked, that our father had saved it, that it was a gift from money he had set aside for her over time. When I told her the truth, she cried in the way people cry when they have to restructure something they thought was one thing into something entirely different. She tried to give me the car. I told her I didn't want the car. "Then what do you want?" she said. "I want you to know where things come from," I said. "I want you to ask going forward. I want you to be the kind of person who asks." She was quiet. "I can do that," she said. We had dinner the following week. The week after that, the frequency of it, the ordinariness of it, felt like something being rebuilt in the particular way things get rebuilt, not the same as before, but load-bearing again. I updated all of my payroll addresses on a Saturday morning in March. Every system, every vendor, every institution that had my name in a database and a correspondence field. I went through them one by one, with the focused patience of someone who has learned what happens when the administration of your own life gets treated as someone else's responsibility. My name, my address, my check, mine. Every field, every form. I hit save on the last one, and I closed the laptop, and I made lunch, and I ate it at my own kitchen table in my own apartment, whose address was correctly on file everywhere that mattered. Some lessons are expensive. This one was. But I have never paid it twice.